Hello and welcome to Newsclick. France has seen a series of terrorist attacks which has left approximately 130 people dead. We are going to discuss about the attack, what impact will it have on Syria and military situation in Syria. To discuss the issue we have with us, editor of Newsclick, Prabir Purkayastha. Hello Prabir, welcome to Newsclick. What is the actual military situation that we can talk about in Syria? What is the military situation in Syria we have today?
One part is very clear, that with the entry of the Russians, the military situation has improved considerably with the Syrian government. Syrian government was otherwise on the back foot, on the defensive, and it was really the two major forces, IS from the east and north, and from the west and south, it was the Jabhat al-Nusra, Ahrar al-Sham. But you have really these two fronts which are distinct. IS on one side, which is on the eastern front, eastern side, and from the north, while on the west and the south, it was really the Jabhat al-Nusra, which is the key player over there, and Ahrar al-Shams, along with the Free Syrian Army groups, which all of them acting in alliance. So you have these two military alliances against the Syrian government. Let's have a quick look at the map and examine what's happening in Syria and Iraq. We really need to take that together. One of the elements that has changed is the attack by the Kurdish forces on Sinjar, which was under IS occupation. And IS was therefore connected to Mosul and Raqqa. There are two strongholds, one in Syria, Raqqa in Syria, Mosul in Iraq, and it was really connected to Sinjar. So the attack of the Peshmergas from this side on Sinjar and the YPG and the Yazidis on Sinjar, and both have resulted in the fall of Sinjar to these forces. So the Kurds have taken over Sinjar. As a result, Mosul and Raqqa's connections have been broken, at least on the highway. Of course, there are other roads which connect the two, so it's not that they have lost complete connectivity. So this is a major military development, in the sense that IS has really lost a vital strategic point in Iraq. This is Sinjar is in Iraq. Coming to the other side, coming to Syria, which is where of course the major battles are currently being fought. If we see the map of Syria, we will find, for instance, that the Turkish border is under the control of Kurds for a substantive part in the east as well in the west. It's only in the middle, it's about 90 kilometers, that the IS and bit of it is also the Jabhat al-Nusra, who are controlling the border between Syria and Turkey, which means that the supply lines to the rest of the insurgency, which is Jabhat al-Nusra and IS, still can get its lifeline from Turkey. So one set of battles are being fought in the northwest, where the Syrian forces are moving in towards Aleppo, and this is Aleppo. They're moving in towards Aleppo and therefore threatening the northern corridor that links essentially Jabhat al-Nusra with Turkey. The Kurds have not as yet attacked at this point. Their main focus seems to be on Sinjar, which we discussed earlier, and also possibly Raqqa, where the US is pressing them to attack. So that we have to see how that develops. But if this 90-kilometer corridor is broken, then it will really mean the isolation of the Jabhat al-Nusra and the IS from its secure supply lines, which is Turkey. The main battle right now seems to be in Aleppo, and Aleppo there is at the moment seeing a lot of Russian strikes. It's largely against Jabhat al-Nusra, who pose the main threat to Aleppo, and Ahrar al-Shams, who are actually in coalition with Jabhat al-Nusra. So these are the two sections which threaten Aleppo, and at the moment the Syrian government forces, with the help of the Russians as well as the Iranians and Hezbollah, have seized the initiative in this sector. They have taken over the Kuaris air base, which was under siege for almost 2.5 years, and they are also taking over parts of the outskirts of Aleppo and probably the east of Aleppo, which has almost become a ghost city. That probably would also fall to the government forces soon. The battles on the south of Syria seem to be less intense at the moment, though IS and Jabhat al-Nusra together did manage to sever the connection between Aleppo and Damascus, but that seems to have been again recovered. So that highway is under the control of the Syrian forces. The battle between Homs and Hama, which is the other major battle, that seems to be again at a lower end at the moment, doesn't seem to have hotted up as much, or the battles south of Damascus, which really is the border between Lebanon and Syria. That part of it doesn't seem to have also hotted up so much. Also the border with Jordan. It seems that these are forces who are more under the control of the Americans and what's called the Free Syrian Army, and they seem to have not taken a very active role as yet. So the main battle is really with Jabhat al-Nusra and Ahrar al-Shams, with which the bulk of the Free Syrian Army units are also in alliance. That's what is called the Jaish-e-Fatah Front, in which they are also participants, and IS. And this is the major battles which are being fought. The main threat to Damascus, Homs, Hama, Aleppo are from Jabhat al-Nusra more than IS, and that's one of the reasons the major fight or the major airstrikes have been against Jabhat al-Nusra and Ahrar al-Shams.
But also, I mean, when we have seen that there has been a series of terrorist attacks on the France, and France has said that it will give a merciless reply to all of it. So what impact will it have on Syria when on one hand we have seen US and Russia coming together to say that we are going to fight IS together?
Let's talk about what the French are going to do. The French till now were the most vocal opponents of Bashar al-Assad in the West. In fact, along with Cameron and as well as the United States, the neocon lobby, they have been demanding regime change and attacks on the Bashar al-Assad government, arguing that there should be what would be called safe haven in north of Syria, which would then be protected by the NATO forces as well as of course Turkey, and therefore providing essentially a safe platform for IS as well as Jabhat al-Nusra to continue their attacks on the Syrian government. So I think that was the basic situation before the IS attack. With the IS attack, for the first time we see French taking a more active role in bombing Raqqa, which is supposedly the IS capital in Syria. Earlier they had bombed in Iraq, but they hadn't bombed the IS in Syria. So they are willing now to come to Raqqa and bomb Raqqa. The Americans have also intensified their strike on Raqqa and now are working along with YPG, which is the PKK allied Kurdish forces in Syria. And they are also trying to support supposedly different Arab groups to work with YPG against IS. The question then, really this is the big question in all this: how serious are they about fighting IS and Jabhat al-Nusra, and do they still want regime change as their top priority? Earlier their focus was regime change of the Bashar al-regime, the fall of the Bashar al-Assad regime, and they were also identifying that all the terrorism is due to his regime as a consequence, and therefore their argument was only if his government falls, then we can talk about fighting IS and Jabhat al-Nusra, which is really Al-Qaeda. We can talk about that, and this is the line that Saudi Arabia and Turkey were also peddling. So what you got was really a very right-wing, revanchist kind of argument, which is very strongly anti-Shia, anti all kinds of sects, anti-Druze, anti-Christians, who saw all of them as enemies, including of course the Alawites, who are supposed to be Shiites. So you had a very, very strong right-wing, extremely fascistic, if you will, religious fascistic forces, which are looking at all these minorities, and they were also trying to establish different kinds of Islamic regime. All of them have their sustenance from Saudi Arabia, Turkey, as well as the Gulf monarchies.
So the International Syria Support Group has come out with a statement which was addressed by the Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov, UN Envoy Mistura, and the US Secretary Kerry. They have said that the continuous killing that has been taking place, that must come to an end we may disagree on our various stands. Can you throw some light on this press statement and what impact is it actually going to have?
Well, the roadmap they have identified is 18 months there will be elections. So that's one. Whether it would happen or not, we have to see. But this argument is within 18 months they could have independent groups which would actually conduct the elections under UN aegis. So that's one. The second part of it is Kerry, for the first time, has clearly identified that Jabhat al-Nusra and IS are two groups that is outside this discussions, and they are not a part of any settlement, any negotiations that would take place between the Syrian government and other groups which are fighting them. The question is, of course, what happens to groups like Ahrar al-Sham, which are very much similar in their outlook and what they have been doing, and are in alliance with Jabhat al-Nusra. What happens to all those groups which are a part of what's called the Jaish-e-Fatah, which is the front that Jabhat al-Nusra leads? So, are they going to be declared as also outside the pale of these negotiations, or are there is going to be a distinction between not so bad groups, not so bad jihadis, moderate jihadis, and not so moderate jihadis? So, I think that part of it we have to see how it plays out on the ground. But on the ground, the distinction between all these forces are really not there at the moment. So, will they separate out these groups? Will these groups break from Jabhat al-Nusra? Will they sit at the table and negotiate something? Will they participate in elections? All this needs to be seen. But the important part is that for the first time we were seeing that they are sitting with Russians and talking about what is the future going to be in Syria. Till now they said the Russian intervention in Syria was totally wrong, they were opposed to it, and they were also earlier claiming that Russia is really not fighting the opposition, but we are. But now it's very clear that unless they act in conjunction, it's not possible to fight anymore. Without Russian support or at least acceptance, it's not possible to carry out airstrikes in Syria. It also means that three sets of air forces over there, if they fight each other, you can get very close to a nuclear war in the world. So I think those are the kind of things that people are sort of coming to terms with, that Russia is a player, and if they want to fight IS, and IS is seen now to be a threat, Al-Qaeda has been a long-term threat to them anyway. So if they want to fight these forces, then they have to really come to terms with Iran, Russia, Syria, and Hezbollah. Now the point is, the military situation on the ground will not substantively change unless there are boots on the ground. And the boots on the ground are not going to come from France and America. So the likelihood of any victory over IS demands that they come to terms with who are doing the actual physical fighting on the ground, because at the end of the day, physically they have to hold that ground, otherwise IS will come back or Al-Qaeda will come back.
Probably also an impact of the attack that we have seen, that the European countries or the US states which were taking in refugees, they have stopped taking in refugees. What impact is it going to have? I mean, is it the refugee crisis that we are witnessing, is it going to get much worse?
Well, one part of the refugee crisis is the war in Syria, okay? Also the war in Iraq. So the question is, the refugee crisis can be addressed in the larger sense only when these countries are stabilized. And that's something that if you don't do, then effectively the refugee crisis will stay. You can erect borders, walls, you can erect barbed wire fences, you can do various things. But at the same time, the issues would still remain, because people would have to escape from this kind of wars, and that's what they seem to be doing. So I think that's a much larger issue. How do you handle the refugee crisis? But it does show that there is a rising right-wing political forces both in the US. Almost all the states who have said we will not take refugees are Republican states. Those are the ones who are declaring this. And Europe, it's very clearly, it's a right again which has been saying for quite some time, no refugees and so on, and are trying to confuse the terrorists and refugees. Let's not forget, the major attacks that have taken place in Europe have been by European citizens. If you export 3,000, 5,000, 10,000 Europeans to fight in Syria, then don't be surprised when it comes back to bite you. So that's what they have done. They have been promoting one-way traffic of people to go and fight in Syria. And now they're surprised that the homegrown terrorism, which is what they fomented by sending them to Syria to fight, encouraging them to go and fight Bashar al-Assad, they're surprised now that it's come back to hit them.
Thank you very much, Prabir, for giving us your time, and as the things proceed, we'll be coming back to you on such issues. Thanks a lot. Thank you for watching Newsclick.